I am a man upon the land. I am a silkie in the sea. And when I'm far and far frae land, my dwelling it is in Skerry. The Great Selkie, a traditional Scottish folk song from the Orkney Islands. It tells of a selkie, or silkie, a seal that becomes a man on the land, and who beds and impregnates an earthly woman, leaves her gold, takes her son with him to the sea, and predicts they will both be killed by her future gunner husband. The lyrics stem from an old Norse Scotch oral folklore tale. It was first written down centuries later and found its way into a collection of English and Scottish ballads collected in the 19th century. Hi, I'm Barbara Barnett, and I am so thrilled to be coming to TudorCon in October to talk about one of my absolutely favorite subjects that has been a passion of mine since high school, I think, and certainly in college and beyond. And that is the supernatural narrative ballads collected by F.J. Child. The Great Selkie was, as far as I knew then, the first child ballad, the first ancient Scottish or British ballad that I had ever sung. And I learned it listening to Judy Collins singing that song when I was in high school. So now, I have a question for you. How old is the oldest song you know? I don't mean the oldest song you know of. And I certainly don't mean 60 years ago, the Beatles or the Rolling Stones or, whatever. I mean a song you actually know well enough that if somebody started singing it, and again, I don't mean your favorite rock band necessarily, you could probably join in. 50 years, 100, 200-year-old song. What if I told you that you might know a song whose ancestors were singing it hundreds and hundreds of years ago? And if we follow some of those songs backwards, they get considerably stranger than the version you might have learned. Because people used to sing about ghosts all the time, and fairies, and revenants, and witches and enchantments, people transforming into animals, dead lovers coming home, fairies stealing people away. Even the devil turns up. People are given impossible tasks to do and use magic to accomplish them. And sometimes two people spend an entire song magically transforming themselves into different creatures and objects in an increasingly determined attempt to outmaneuver one another. Which brings me to one of my other favorites. It's called The Two Magicians. And rather than explain it, I think I'll sing a little of it to you. She looked out of the window as white as any milk. He looked in at the window as black as any silk. Allo, 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 you coal blacksmith. You have done me no harm. You never shall have me maidenhead that I have kept so long. I'd rather die a maid. But then she said, to be buried all in me grave, than to have such a nasty, husky, dusky, fusky, musky coal blacksmith. A maiden I will die. She became a duck all on the stream, and he became a water dog and fetched her back again. Allo, 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 you coal blacksmith. You have done me no harm. You never shall have me maidenhead that I have kept so long. I'd rather die a maid. But then she said, to be buried all in me grave, than to have such a nasty, husky, dusky, fusky, musky coal blacksmith. A maiden I shall die. Well, the song keeps going and going and going for lots and lots of verses. She changes shape to run away from him. He changes shape so that he can pursue and then catch her. She changes again, so does she. It's essentially a supernatural pursuit conducted by two people who apparently have unlimited magical powers and absolutely no interest in resolving their differences through conversation. Wow, does that sound familiar? But there's no magic these days. Well, at least none that I practice. And I love it. But the reason I'm talking about it at TudorCon isn't simply because it's wonderfully weird. I'm interested in how a song like that survives all these centuries, if not millennia. It's because the two magicians and the Great Selkies are both called child ballads. Now, what's a child ballad, you may ask? When I first heard the term child ballad, way back when I was, I think, a freshman in college, it certainly, to me, I was like, they don't sound like a child's song or a ditty or anything like that. And I scratched my head a little bit. So I learned it was far from it. I would no more share the lyrics of some of these child ballads with the children than I would share the original tales of the Brothers Grimm without being Disneyfied. So who was Child? Francis James Child was a scholar at Harvard who devoted years to collecting and comparing traditional English and Scottish ballads. The result was the monumental work, English and Scottish Popular Ballads, published in the late 19th century. He organized the material into 305 ballads, but not just 305 ballads. Narrative ballads, each one 20, 30, 40 verses long. Some of them were fragments, but many of them were so long, they literally could be epic ballad proportions. And each one of them has numerous variants, from as far-flung places as Brittany, the Orkneys, London, Edinburgh, Glasgow, the Highlands, everywhere beyond Ireland. It's why his collection sprawled 5 volumes. My aunt and uncle bought it for me for my undergraduate graduation, and it's much beloved and dog-eared, living still in my library in its paperback form. So when I say The Two Magicians is Child 44, I'm not saying Child wrote it. He didn't, of course. He was trying to collect and organize a tradition that was already ancient, going far more back than Tudor England. There are tales from Tudor times, certainly, and the older tales survived and were sung then. But there are tales in there of Robin Hood, Richard Lionheart, and more, and of course the supernatural ballads. But there's not one definitive melody for any of them. The two that I sang, the one that I learned that had been sung by Judy Collins, and the Two Magicians that I had first heard sung by Maddie Pryor in Steel Eye Span, were not necessarily even the most popular melodies for them of their time. So there are versions, or as folklorists call them, variants. There are also not even one definitive set of words. All of it is passed on by oral tradition, or as we call it in my folk singer days, the folk process, which still goes on. So I'm going to give you a very sophisticated demonstration of oral transmission. Imagine I sing you a song and you like it. And you don't have your phone, you don't record me, and I don't give you sheet music. You just hear it. A few days later, there's an earworm in your ear and you're humming it. Maybe you don't even remember all the words, or maybe you don't remember any of them. A month later, and some of the words begin to come back and you can still remember most of the melody, but maybe it's not exactly the same melody. 6 months later, somebody says, "What was that song? That's really catchy." And you sing it to them, except, what was the third verse or the fourth? Was that, wait, what, huh? What? And you put it in your own way to transmit that song. I knew there was something about a forest, or was it a garden? No, and then there was that line that never quite made sense to you. So maybe it was in a different dialect, or in the case, as I sung earlier, of the Great Selkie, a completely different language. So perhaps without realizing it, you've substituted a word that does make sense. And that awkward bit in the melody, you've smoothed it out. Congratulations, you have just created a variant. Now the person you sang it to learns your version. They change something else. Their daughter learns it. She changes something. Her son moves 50 miles away, he sings it there, and maybe in a different dialect or language. Somebody combines it with a part of another song, and somebody else forgets 4 verses. After all, there were a lot of them. And another singer thinks the ending is terrible and fixes it, or thinks that it is completely inappropriate in our day and age and changes it. Now do that for 300 years, 400 years. You have now entered the oral tradition zone. And here's another complication. Some songs don't travel, so no songs, travel through empty space. People carry them, people move, people marry, people migrate, they cross borders, and eventually people who knew those old British ballads got onto ships and crossed the Atlantic. The songs came with them. Because some of these extraordinarily old ballads survived in North America. Some were profoundly changed. Some died completely. Some survived, but with melody more pleasing to new North American ears. Collectors found versions in the United States and Canada, and sometimes you can put an American version beside a British or Scottish version and immediately recognize there's a connection there. Other times you really have to squint, sometimes really hard, and sometimes, no, what was that connection? Because something happens along the way. And this is where the supernatural ballads get really interesting. So imagine that the song survives, but the world that made the song changes. Suppose your old song contains a fairy. Generation after generation sings it, but eventually the singers don't understand what fairies are in quite the same way their ancestors did, right? We've all seen fairies and they're cute little things, and maybe not so much. So maybe the fairy world now is considered a heresy, as it might have been in Puritan America, or simply put out of favor for religious or other reasons. So what happens to the song? The song is pretty good. You don't want to lose it altogether. So maybe the fairy stays. Maybe it becomes something else. Maybe the supernatural explanation disappears entirely while the bones of the story itself remain. A ghost may remain unmistakably a ghost, or the supernatural encounter can become increasingly ordinary. How sad. An enchanted creature, enchanted character, can turn into an ordinary human antagonist. A magical event can become something that simply just happens. And sometimes a piece of supernatural material survives almost inexplicably, long after everything else around it has changed. That fascinates me. Because suddenly, these aren't just old songs. They're evidence of memory, not perfect memory, human memory, messy memory, creative memory, collective memory. And the singers matter. And this is something else. This is something else I wanted to talk about in my TudorCon talk. It's very easy to imagine oral tradition as though it were some mysterious collective process. Songs changed through the folk. But there isn't actually a creature called the folk wandering around Britain singing ballads. There are people. Individual singers, a mother teaching a daughter, someone hearing a song at work, a traveler carrying one somewhere else, a singer who remembers 20 verses and another who only remembers 1. Someone who thinks an old song is beautiful, someone who thinks it's need a vast improvement. Someone who just simply sings it differently and thinks another melody would work better. Who maybe sets what was a profoundly spoken talked song without instruments, a cappella, like I sang my 2 songs, to guitar or banjo, or electric guitar with a rock beat, and a recording contract and a YouTube page, and a Spotify account. Oral tradition becomes something more knowable, tangible, and rememberable. Why do these stories last? A song in which somebody's lover comes back from the grave is not exactly everyday realism or a romance. Well, maybe it could be romantasy. Neither is a magical transformation contest. Neither is being carried away by fairies, yet people continue to sing these stories for centuries. So what we're going to do is explore not only what supernatural creatures and ideas appear in the child ballads, but what happens to them over time. What gets preserved, what gets lost, what gets transformed, what crosses the Atlantic, and what does America do with it once it gets here? And you're going to help me by singing, or humming if you choose, or just keeping beat with your toes tapping on the floor. Some will be familiar, some won't. Some will have a refrain that will be easy to learn and will become an earworm by the end of TudorCon. Others won't. You may know the exact same setting of the ballad or a different one entirely. And if you do, you'll be able to teach us that different melody if there's time during my talk. F.J. Child put these ballads into enormous books. Collectors preserved the texts. Scholars cataloged the variants, and libraries preserved manuscripts. Archives preserved recordings, and all of that matters. But for centuries, the thing keeping many of these stories alive wasn't an archive. It was somebody saying, I know a song, and then singing it and passing it forward. Most of the ballads I know and sing, I heard from modern interpreters. Joan Baez, Judy Collins, Martin Carthy, Frankie Armstrong, even Simon and Garfunkel. The songs found their way from my mouth to others' ears and even into my 2 novels whose hero is based on a hero of one of these very ballads. But for more, you'll have to come to my talk. So let's end this little teaser the same way we began, not by talking about a ballad, but by singing one. Hallo, 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 ye cold blacksmith, ye have done me no harm, ye never shall have me maidenhead that I have kept so long, I'd rather die a maid, but then she said, to be buried all in me grave, then with a musky, dusky, fusky, busky, cold blacksmith, a maiden I shall die. I'll see you at TudorCon in October. Bye, everyone.